Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're honored and so pleased to have you with us today. This has been a dream of the foundation for the last 15 years to develop and kind of share with you more of Elisabeth's work, her philosophies, and what she tried to do in her lifetime and beyond her lifetime. So we have a new education director, Rodrigo Luz, in Brazil. And we have some of our board members with us today, including Diane Gray, and we have Wilka from Mexico. And anyway, I just want to welcome you and say, we're excited to share these speakers. They're really amazing speakers. Some of the speakers worked with Elisabeth for many, many years doing the life, death, and transition workshops. And then we have some leading people in the field. We have Cole, who's going to talk about thanatology. We have Wilka, Diane, we have wonderful Dr. Ira Byock, and many other wonderful speakers, including Liese today, who I've known for decades off and on, visiting her down in New Zealand and seeing her in America occasionally. So anyway, we're here to continue Elisabeth's work in hospice and palliative care and grief, but we're also here to continue, her message of facing life with love and not with fear, and just opening up our hearts and getting rid of our fears which stop us from living fully. So the work won't only be about Elisabeth during these sessions, but it will continue her spirit and her message. So if you have any questions, suggestions, problems, issues, whatever it is, please feel free to write me, kenrossaz@yahoo.com, or write us through the foundation. Talk to Rodrigo or Wilke if you have any suggestions, and we're always happy to do whatever we can to make your experience more comfortable. So again, thank you. The last time I checked, we had people from 23 countries, so that's exciting to see the interest in this work. And I will let you continue on with the presentation. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can feel the butterflies inside your heart because that's what I'm feeling right now. When you are talking about Elisabeth's legacy, you are talking actually about butterflies inside you and you becoming a better person and offering your better part to everyone and to yourself. So, thank you really much. And today we are going to start a process, a very important process. We are going to become butterflies. So I say hello to the butterfly inside you. And thank you really much for your love, your concern. And I hope you can find peace and meaning during our meetings. So today we are going to have someone really special to me and to Elisabeth Kübler-Ross and to the foundation. Someone very beautiful. And beautiful people do not just happen. I've learned that lesson. So be prepared because we are going to learn from someone very special. Liese, she was an Elisabeth friend and she was friend of Elisabeth and her student. And she worked with her for so many years. So it's a great pleasure to have you here with us, Liese, and to learn from you and to offer Elisabeth's lessons to everybody. So thank you really much, my beautiful friend.
Thank you, Rodriga. Let me put up the PowerPoint. Greetings, warm, warm greetings from New Zealand. It is such a privilege to be here, and I am looking forward to this dance together. To start with, as you can maybe see behind me, I have lit a candle because there is a lot of suffering, and especially in this pandemic worldwide, so many people who are suffering, so many people who are dying, and I think we need all the light we can get. And I want to pay my respect to all of those who are working so hard and who are dealing with grief and bereavement all over the world. Also, some familiar names that I see on the list, and I will connect with you during the talk. To start with, I need to honor my ancestors. I need to honor the people who have been my mentors. And the first one is my grandmother. I was born in Friesland, which is part of the Netherlands. It's where the black and white cows come from. It's the only thing we're famous for. Anyway, we are a minority culture in a majority culture in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is bilingual. And I grew up with my grandmother, and she taught me about the tradition of the Frisian cultures. And so I am steeped in that, and I know about that. I am not in any way an expert on any of the other cultures, because I think a culture is so woven through everything in a human being, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. So today I want to talk a bit about how can we collaborate, how can we work together. I want to honor her in that and in her wisdom. The next mentor, the next person who has been such a teacher in my life is our daughter Nana, and here she is, 1972. She died in 1972, and she died 2 days after the birth of our son Aiko. So that was hope and despair, and joy and sorrow, and all those contrasts, the delight and then the anguish. And like Elisabeth used to say in her workshops, which I really loved, you can turn your life, you can make then the rest of your life with trauma, you can make the rest of your life a prison, or you can make it a school. And one of the things she certainly has taught me, and Nana has taught me, is to make it a school. We had another daughter, and we are blessed with many granddaughters, and I think they are other big teachers right now. I'm speaking slowly because the talk is also translated, so I do not want to rush too much, because otherwise the interpreters, and thank you for interpreting, you won't be able to keep up with me. So I hope that this is going all right now. And this, of course, Elisabeth Kübler-Ross is one of my big mentors too, one of my big teachers. And her teachings continue, and I think learning continues all through life. So I honor her in that as well. Regarding culture, here I live in New Zealand, and one of my big teachers here is Faya Hannah Munro. She is of Ngāti Rehia descent. She's Maori, and again, how do you say that? It is like increasing my understanding of standing in a different culture and living in a different culture and with a different worldview. And so that is what, again, she is very much teaching me about that. And another one is Pastor Wrightson, Muramara, from Australia. He also has been very influential in opening my eyes to some of the different ways we relate, and the different ways we grieve, and the different ways we mourn in culture. Simple stuff. Life and suffering go together. And I think all that we are listening, who are listening here right now, and all together, we all have dealt with loss. We all have maybe right now are dealing with loss. That's how it is. And suffering and life do go together, and love and loss do go together. And that is the price we pay for love, is the pain when there is loss. And that might be loss on many different levels. What is suffering? A state of undergoing pain, distress, loss and hardship associated with events that threaten the intactness of a person and their community. And I just want to say something about that, because when a person has personally a loss, people do not, we all don't live in isolation. We don't live as a silo. We are part of community, whatever that community is. So that when loss impacts, it does not only impact on one person, it impacts and spreads its ripples all through. And I think that's important to remember, coming from two paradigms often. It is, and some of us in some of the cultures come from an individual focused paradigm where the individual and authenticity is at the center. And there are many other cultures where community is the center. Community is the focus, and the person is within that. So I want to talk a little bit just about the universality right now of grief, loss, and bereavement, and about connection. And so that here it is, and this is Nozomi. She is one of our granddaughters, and I promise you I won't put 1,000 pictures up of my grandchildren, although I would love to do that. But however, here is one that really clearly shows what it is about in life. This is a picture of connection, a picture of love, a picture of relatedness, a picture of being mirrored. And you can maybe see her mom's, Barbara's, face here. By the way, I asked permission to Nozomi to use this picture when she was about 10, and she was quite chuffed about it. And what happens is this: here in this sacred space, in this area, in this in between, that is where the connectedness happens. That is where I think the medicine happens. That is where the relationship happens. And that is where everything comes together, and which is so essential and fundamental in human life. I think that goes beyond culture. It is about connection and about love and relationship. And I call this sacred ground. And no matter where we are or who we are working with, from what culture, and no matter how different it is, sacred ground is always something that we need to remember. It's the first thing in our toolbox. And in this sacred ground, figuratively speaking, we need to take our shoes off to step into that. And here is another picture of a moment of connection. I've had the privilege to work in collaboration with the Kacha Cancer Center in India. Very different culture, very different from my own Frisian culture. And it is about how do we make connection. This little one I had briefly met because her mom was in hospital. And when I met her, she just kept looking at me, you know, this strange woman with very white skin and looking very different from very many other people. And she just kept looking and did not really connect. Then I was waiting outside for the ambulance to go somewhere with the team. And while I was waiting outside, she came outside with her father, and she turned sideways And for a moment, her eyes lit up and she looked at me and she recognized me. And something had happened, I think, in between when she had watched and watched and watched. And in between the moment that you see right here, she reached out her hand and we had a moment of connection. Nothing said, we did not speak each other's language, but that is the essence of it. It is about the openness and the awareness and the willingness to be in that multidimensional space, physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, where then a connection can happen. And at the moment a connection happens, I believe healing happens, love flows, and that is the sense. So I'm grateful to this little one for showing me. This is a moment from one human being to another human being. We need to also be aware that that is uh, very much also in community. And like I said before, some cultures being very much community focused and other cultures being individual focused. This is Ubuntu. This is Ubuntu. It is a game for the Pygmy people in the Congo, and Ubuntu means I am because we are. We are interconnected. I am because we are. We are together and we are in this all together. And so what we have is the energy and strength and the togetherness of a community. And that can be a real healing place. And I think we all have that yearning to find community. And we find it in different places. It might be in our families and in our villages, in our cities, in our work life as well. It might also be like this, being aware that this is a community too, that one of the ways where gang members certainly find a sense of belonging is becoming part of the gang. And so we can have community in many different ways, connection in many different ways. And that is some with beautiful ways of expression and other in really expressing and at times acting out a lot of pain. Here is another way of connection. And for some people or many people, I think, around the world, it might have been that connection with other people has become too unsafe. It has become too painful. It has become too much. And then that is where also that interconnectedness with animals comes in. In Indonesia, I've been again collaboratively working with a pediatric palliative care team who works in the slums. And this team, Rachel House, again, does a tremendous job. Very under-resourced, very in a very poor setting. And I think it is magic that they do, because they personify that connectedness, even if they have very little means of making palliative care work in the way we might do that. I'm coming from a Western perspective. And there I met, and they introduced me to this little boy who had lost his parents. He was living with family, and they sort of took him in, but he was not very much. He didn't. There was not much time for love and care, and so one of the things that really made him light up in his heart and soul was his connection with his python. Heart attack material, actually, because it's big. And so anyway, what he did was he showed me and he introduced me to his python. And so it became for me again a very important symbol of how we make connection, how we find creatively the love, the flow, the energy, and create and connect with that which we feel is an expression of love. And for this little boy, his python was very much a connectedness. It was very much a relationship of love. And being aware also that for many cultures and for many people, it is the land that we have a strong relationship with. It is the land that is giving solace and feeds us, and we connect with as well. So I want to talk today about mourning and grieving. And this is English words. You already hear, English is not my first language. And so I want to differentiate between mourning and grieving. And for a moment, start with grief. And what is grief? Grief is our response to a significant loss. And the depth of the love is in relation to the depth of the pain. Grieving is a unique, subjective state of responses and feelings that rise spontaneously, and they are very unique to every person. We all grieve differently. We all grieve, and our grief flow is different. And that is what is grieving. So the key around that, it is unique and it is very personal. And then I want to bring in mourning. Mourning, identifying that as a set of customs, ceremonies, rituals, and behaviors prescribed by a culture's tradition. And here is the funeral of my mum. And I would like to tell you a story about that. Here's the funeral of my mom, and in the Frisian culture, traditionally, the coffin would be carried around the graveyard 3 times and carried on the shoulders, and that was to ward off bad spirits and to make sure that the person who had died would make a transition that was easy and flowing. Now that had changed by the time my mom died, and so we did not carry the coffin. It was rolled in. I wasn't quite sure what I felt about this. Growing up in my Frisian culture, and for us, burial is the way of uh, doing the funeral and not the cremation. And that again is different in different cultures. So here is the burial of my mom. And and graveyards are very wonderful playing grounds. And I grew up next to a graveyard. And so it was wonderful to be able to play on the graveyard. However, there was one thing I really clearly learned from my culture, from my ancestors. You would never, ever step on a grave. That was such sacred ground that whenever in the play we would just accidentally step on the grave, wow, there was a very clear message about that, that was an absolute no. So I grew up with that and I knew about that. Then in 2009, there was a big tsunami in Samoa, and many people died. And I received an invitation to go to Samoa and work there in trauma recovery, in seeing how together healing can happen in the big loss. And I have permission, by the way, to tell the stories I am telling. And so I met amongst many other people, I met a young mom who lost her 3 children. Her name is Sina, and she came from a family, and the family who lived close to the coast, the family had lost 14 members. And in Samoa, um, so first of all, the pain just huge with losing 14 members of the family. In Samoa, the tradition is to bury the loved ones on the land by the house. And so this family um, decided to bury the 14 people in one big grave by the house, and you can see this here. And what this moment was in the photo is a year after the death, there was a unveiling service and ceremony, and it was around the time where I was invited back and to attend that. Now, Sina and I had worked together and mostly sat together a lot as one bereaved mum with another. That kind of where a lot of time we spent just being together, not much said. And I'll talk about silence a bit later. And at times where she wept, where her pain, where she told me the stories about her children too, and I honor them and I honor her. Anyway, she was sitting here on this big grave, just at this side, um, and she was beckoning me because she had taken great care together with her husband to find 3 headstones and to make sure that they were exactly how she wanted her children to be represented. So she beckoned me because she wanted to show me. I was standing here. I was standing on the graphs and seeing that. And without really thinking about it, because I was connecting with Sina, I lifted up one foot to step onto the grave. And what happened was all my ancestors came in, and I heard these voices saying, "Don't you dare." I froze. It was visceral. It is that sense of my body did not want to step onto the grave. It was so, and I think what it taught me was how much culture is just intrinsically integrated, physically as well as emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. So there I was standing on one leg and very quickly negotiating with all my Frisian people and saying, listen, I think, and wondering whose need was the greatest. And I decided what the need that was the greatest right now was to step onto the grave and to come to Zina and to be there together. So we sat on the grave together, and I did step on and we sat together. However, all that time, it was like all my cells kept screaming and my heart kept screaming, get off, this is sacred, this is not the right place. I never felt comfortable. And so that taught me something very important about how can we sit with uncomfortableness, if that is a word, with not being comfortable uh, in different culture because it is unknown, it is unfamiliar. And then how do we deal with that uncomfortableness? And do we deal with it by leaning into it, or do we deal with it by leaning away from it? So what stops us from respecting and accepting difference? What binds us? It is fear. And Ken, you talked already about how Elisabeth always talked about, you know, choose your life, living it out of love, not out of fear. However, fear comes in, and love and fear are both very closely linked together. So what happens is when we find it difficult to accept difference. We get bound if too much difference becomes too threatening, and our fear comes in. We get bound. We get tied up. We can't move anymore. We cannot relate anymore. And one of the things that Elizabeth, one of the books Elizabeth gave a hint, no, she didn't give it to me. She recommended in this, in reading about the fear of death and the fear of separation and of annihilation, is this book, The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. She writes on that, one of those rare masterpieces that will stimulate you, your curiosity, and last but not least, your soul. And it is, again, what that was about is something that certainly Elizabeth has always been fierce about, and I've been learning about through life, the fear of death and what that is like, and how the fear of difference, the fear of annihilation, and how, what that is like, and how to be with that, and how do we do the healing. So going to some research about it, Ernest Becker talked about the denial of death and about the terror of death and the fear of death. And Greenberg, Solomon, and Shisinski have done a lot of research on what they call terror management theory. And what is terror management theory? Is a protection from death anxiety and or the real or perceived threat to the integrity of the self. So what we do is we close in and we focus inside and we go with what is familiar and go with where we have a sense of belonging and where there is no discomfort. It creates a cultural anxiety buffer and individual conception of worldview and faith. So it is that sense of I belong with this group, and that's what is familiar. And I identify with this culture in itself. That is beautiful and that is very important. However, in the fear of otherness, what happens is we create in-groupers and out-groupers. Those who belong with me, with us, and those who don't belong with us. And that creates separation. And so when that separation happens and when that split off happens, no flow of healing can happen, no communication can happen. And talking about bereavement and healing grief and loss, it becomes a them and us. And the more self-worth, the more self-esteem all of us have, the more we know about who we are, that equals more tolerance, because the more centered and clear I feel and am inside myself, and you are in yourself, and stand firmly grounded in your own culture, in your own traditions, the less you need to feel threatened by others, or the less you need to force the others to think the way you think, the way I think. So the hard bit about the fear is what we do is we create a box and we box ourselves in. This is my culture. This is my way of doing it. That's the only way to do it. And you might do the same. And when we do that, we create separation. And we create a sense of I am in the majority and you are in the minority and you are not right. And your way of mourning and grieving is not okay. It is my way. There is a quote here from a New Zealand doctor who worked a lot with Maori, and who are the indigenous people of New Zealand. His name is Glenn Colquhoun, and he said this about majority and minority cultures. The most difficult thing about majorities is not that they cannot see minorities, but that they cannot see themselves. Everything, there is no contrast, no dissonance. Everything is white on white. Everything is white on white, or everything is black on black. It doesn't matter what it is. What it is we see difference very clearly. However, because we are so comfortable in our own uh, being, and we know our own culture, that we become unconscious to that. And so the whole focus is becomes on the difference, and the focus becomes on realizing that the otherness is strange, and that becomes our shadow. When it becomes our shadow. What is our shadow? Our shadow is that part of us that we fail to see. What is my dogma? What are my belief systems? What are my thoughts around it? Where does my tolerance go into intolerance? It is really, what is our shadow? It is the dark side which our ego wishes to hide from, and which we wish to hide from others. It is that sense inside ourselves where we have our unfinished business, which is what Elisabeth talked about a lot. It is that unfinished business, that where instead of coming from a place of love, we come from a place of fear, or at times we come from a place of shame, or we come from a place of guilt. And in the life, death, and transition workshops, certainly, um, what I learned very much, it was around the healing of that. Now, those workshops were uh, con- uh, conducted in a specific way, and that was a culture of that workshop. And it was about healing, healing the pain inside. And I think that's for all of us. And there are many ways of doing that. We can also, when we dare to lean into where we become judgmental and dogmatic and find otherness too strange, too different, when we lean into that, it can vitalize life. It does need courage, however, to lean into those dark places, into those places inside ourselves that maybe we shy away from. When we shy away from that, and we don't heal our own, continue to heal our own pain, we can develop, with working with different cultures and different peoples, we can develop something which is called expertosis. And what is expertosis? It's a belief that the professional knows better than the patient and or their community what they need. You need to do your grieving, your healing, your recovery this way. Because that is the best way. We come from our own paradigm, and there is nothing wrong with that as long as we are aware of that. But we don't see the other's paradigm. So the other becomes invisible in that. And this is a really clear cartoon that I found, and I have permission to use. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you're an expert on my life and how I should live it. Please continue while I take notes. So what do we need? We need integrity, authenticity, and we need courage. When we face the worst that can happen in any situation, we grow. When circumstances are at their worst, we can find our best. We can lean into the best, or we can lean away from it and not face it. And one of those moments was really clearly here, and I want to put this on. This is Aisha Evans in the Baton Rouge protests in the United States in 2016 after another black person was shot, and she demonstrated, and there was a lot of riot police. And when you look at this photo, the riot police came up to her and was running up to her, and the photographer Jonathan Bachman just caught this moment because they were running up to her to arrest her. And there she stood in her flowing dress, in her own strength, in her integrity, in her authenticity. And for a moment they bounced back. For a moment, they moved back. You can see it in the body language. What did they move back from? They moved back from her strength. And for a moment, they were aware of that. She did get arrested. However, what it showed, this one, was the courage. And I think that is the importance, the courage to remain in our authenticity, despite the fear and the threat, and to stay centered in our own strength and our own energy. So what is in our toolbox? And this is a bit looking at culture on speed. So let's have a look. Let's open the toolbox. One of those things I already talked about. We need courage to lean into the discomfort, and courage to heal our prejudices, our judgments, our belief systems that exclude instead of include. And the first thing we need, and this I'm going to repeat here right now, is the capacity to listen. Diana Gray, who presented before, she also spoke about this. So this is repetition, and I think repetition is where we learn and we keep on learning. What is listening? Listening is being attentive, and listening is to understand the other. That is the intent. And that is understanding the other in their culture, in their customs, in their way of expressing grief, in their way of being with grief, whether that is expressive or whether that is quite impressive. What prevents our true listening is when we don't listen with the intent to understand the other. We listen with the intent to reply. And I like that cartoon. It's when we miss each other. It is when, instead of listening and meeting each other, we miss each other. When we respond, we are intending to respond. At the moment I listen with the intent to formulate a response, then what happens is I am already with the response and I separate away from you. I start to miss you. I cannot hear you anymore. I cannot attune you to you anymore because I'm focused on my response. There, John Swinton at the University of Aberdeen, Professor John Swinton, who's done a lot of research around culture and how we relate, and being aware that we can empirically research protocols and guidelines, and we can do a lot of empirical research. However, what we can't research empirically, we can only research qualitatively, is relationship and consciousness. And relationship and consciousness are at the heart of cultural understanding. He talks about 3 moments of cultural understanding. Thinking about culture, which is reflection, and it's a big key in our toolbox, reflectiveness, being able to reflect. moving beyond culture. And that is where the commonality, our humanness comes in. Empathy and compassion are universal. Uh, they go across cultures, they go underneath cultures, they go beyond culture. And the other one is understanding culture, which is he calls interpathy. It is the relatedness together. I put up this picture of this mural when I was with very dear friends in San Francisco. I saw this mural, and it says something very important. La cultura cura la locura. Culture heals craziness. I think that's what it means, but my Spanish is lousy. But it is like that. When we are not in our own sense of being, in our own sense of culture, and that is not being able to be mirrored, it creates craziness, it creates a separation, it creates a despondency and a despair. While, and here come the butterflies that Rodrigo talked about too, where, and Elisabeth talks about butterflies all the time, where when we take our soul expression and our heart expression, which is culture is part of that, and instead of it being tightened or being blocked or being closed off, we can open it up and let the light be in there, and being seen and being heard and being honored and respected in that, that, that creates the healing of the wounding of the soul, the wounding that happens when um, culture, when cultural expression, whether it's family culture or community culture or the culture of a people's, cannot be expressed when it gets suppressed or when it gets judged. Val Maasdorp and Jenny Hunt have been working for a tremendously long time in Islet Hospice in Harare, Zimbabwe, doing brilliant work with their team. It is, and I honor them. Elisabeth came to Zimbabwe in 1994. In 1996, with three of us from New Zealand, three staff members, we came to Island Hospice in Harare and to conduct the externalization workshops, the workshops where expressing of feelings is at the center, being with whatever you need to do to heal the pain. I learned something very important there from one of the participants. She was a nun. She had been, like many in Zimbabwe, through a lot of trauma and horrors in the independence war. And she had been wounded tremendously. Uh, she came and when we said, you're welcome to express and be with the pain in whatever way you need to be with this. And she said, I all I need to do is I've come here to rest a while, to be silent, to be still. And that is something important too. Learn to get in touch with the silence within yourself and know that everything in this life has a purpose. And so for some cultures, the outward expression is very important. And for other people, other cultures, there is a silence. And in the silence, the healing can happen. Being aware that one way of healing pain is not everybody's way, and that for some it is silent. And that it brings me to another concept of cultural humility. Dr. Rajagopal, who is one of the board members of the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, and he's the founder of Pallium India, and has done and is continuing to do incredible groundbreaking work in making palliative care, growing palliative care in India. And when we had a communication about this, I had the privilege to work with him. He said, in our country, we need to develop palliative care protocols and systems that are suited to the local background and socio-cultural milieu. They need to be firmly grounded in local customs and culture. We cannot supplant one template from one culture onto another culture and think one size fits all. It needs to be firmly grounded in local customs and culture. And so in many organizations at the moment, certainly there is the training in cultural competence. Cultural competence implies that we can be trained to know another culture. And I am not sure about that. I think another culture is not only something that intellectually you know about, you have to be steeped in it and stand in it totally. And that being from another culture, there will always be an otherness and a difference and a strangeness at times. So instead of looking at cultural competence, I would like to introduce cultural humility. Tervalon and Murray Garcia wrote about that, and it's been developed further. What is cultural humility? It is when we continue to, through introspection, through reflection, through self-reflection, continue to learn about our responses to different culture, so that we can honor that culture and sit in that sacred ground together without imposing our own beliefs. What happens in cultural humility, we sit together, figurative speaking, we sit together on the ground and we bring together in the healing, the ways of healing, learning from each other, not being an expert. I can only be an expert, and that is actually debatable, about my own culture, my own way of grieving, my own way of mourning in our culture. I can never be an expert on yours, because yours is different, and it is about coming together and looking at what is the commonality we have here in the human suffering, and still honoring the local customs and culture. So what we need is perseverance. And I would like to read to you uh, uh, a poem, or it's a kind of a little story that really tells us about perseverance. Because the hard bit about when we miss each other is that it is easy to give up, to think, I don't understand, I don't know what they're on about, or I can't get it right, and we withdraw. And here is where our courage comes in again, to continue to have the willingness to understand together, to go from the missing of each other to the connecting of each other. So here we go. She asked me if she took one pill for her heart, and one pill for her hips, and one pill for her chest, and one pill for her blood. How come they would all know which part of her body they should go to? I explained to her that active metabolites in each pharmaceutical would adopt a spatial configuration leading to an exact interface with receptor molecules on the cellular surfaces of the target structures involved. She told me not to bullshit her. I told her that each pill had a different shape and that each part of her body had a different shape, and that her pills could only work when both those shapes would fit together. She said I had no right to talk about the shape of her body. I said that each pill was a key and that her body was 10,000 locks. She said she wasn't going to swallow that either. I told her they worked by magic. She asked me why I hadn't said that in the first place. We persevere, we persevere, we persevere, and then we come together. We miss, we miss, we miss, and then we come together. And the other one we need is maintaining perspective, realizing that maybe while you all look at this picture, some of you see this person sideways and others see this person from the front, as if they're looking at you from the front. So what we need is being open-minded and being flexible, being aware of our judgments, dogmas, and belief system, and making a commitment to healing those. And that is where I want to come back to Muramara, who is from the Wiradjuri tribe. And when I was working in Wodonga in 2010, he gifted me a painting. It's the painting that is hanging behind me, and a big honor. And in the painting, he had painted his ancestors in the Murray River. And he, with a big grin, he smiled at me and he said, "You take this painting home and you better ask, these are my people, and you ask and they will look after you in the work that you are doing." And so that's what happened. I took the painting home and it's very precious to me. Now, what happened was I was at the speaking at a conference in Australia a few years later, and I thought I would make a how do you say that, photograph the picture, this painting, photograph the painting to illustrate something in my talk. I photographed it with my mobile phone and sent it then on to my email to import it in my pictures. And I did that 3 times and nothing happened. Strange. It didn't want to come through. It was really clear. So after a while, I gave up because there was no way I could come together in this, that I could have this happen. When I was at the conference, I was sitting with a group of Aborigine women and at the conference dinner. And at the conference dinner, there was also a group of women who were singing different songs. And one of the songs they were singing was an Aborigine song. I don't remember from what tribe, but it was a tribe different from the women who were sitting around the table. And everybody was singing because it seemed it was a song that was well known through a lot of Australia. However, the 3 women closed down like that, and their eyes went down and their faces became very serious, and they did not sing. And I wondered about that because they had been very animated and something happened. So I asked them after the song, I said, "Why did you not sing this song?" And they said, "It is not our song and we have not had permission." And that's when I realized We have not had permission. That's when I realized that I had not asked Muramara permission to use the painting. So I called him up. He cracked up laughing when I told him the story, and I asked him permission whether I could use a picture of the painting in my work. He said, yeah, ask the ancestors. They are in charge of this. I am not. So that's what I did. And so I was very curious. I thought, I'll try again. And so there is where, with the camera came, I pointed with the camera again. I took with my mobile phone, the photograph. It came into the email, no problem. This is what it taught me very clearly about asking permission and honoring wherever we go. The other thing we do need is lightheartedness and a sense of humor. And here is Siu. She calls herself Tiny Eye. She's a Chinese cartoonist who really makes fun of how we have these cultural belief systems and judgments. I'm from China. Nice to meet you. Please don't eat my cat. What we need is, especially when working cross-culturally, we need lightheartedness and a sense of humor. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves and when we are making mistakes, because we're bound to make mistakes. And in the laughter and in the lightheartedness, there is again a possibility to come together. And when we come together, healing happens again. And the other one is hope. Hope is so vital. Now, hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. And what gives hope? It's about the light. When you and I, in different ways in different paradigms, as different peoples, in different ways of upbringing, in different ways of how we learned about how we mourn, how we grieve, what we do. We are different in that. However, when I can see you and you see me, we come into this communal sacred ground. And when we do that, the light comes in. I asked Sophia, one of our granddaughters who's 12 and a beautiful artist, I said, can you paint me, draw me or draw me, make me a painting about hope? And this is what she made. And I said, tell me about it. And she said, well, Beppe, she said, it is so much concrete, and it seems like the world is building more and more buildings, and it seems like there are no plants and no trees anymore that can grow, and there are so many places where we are destroying our trees and our plants. And she said, and this is one little plant that finds a little crack where it can grow again and where the light can come in. Children get it. And hope, we all need it. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. It is that multidimensional energy which originates, I believe, in the spiritual quadrant, and it really gets activated and energized and strengthened in the physical, emotional, and intellectual quadrants when we are being seen, are being heard, we are being acknowledged. So the key about all this is reflection. It is self-reflection. It is always learning more, healing on the inside. The dogmas, because unconditional love is wonderful, but however, I am not able to practice that 24 hours a day. If any of you are able to practice that 24 hours a day, will you please get in touch with me, because I would love to. I would love to learn to do that. However, it is the striving for being as non-judgmental as is possible and reflecting on where our non-judgment goes into judgment. That is our work we need to do. Reflection and then healing in whatever way we need to do that, whether that is through expressing our anger or being quiet on the inside. Um, it is our unique way. Reflecting on our knowledge leads to understanding. Learning always continues and never stops. Reflecting on our experience leads to good judgment, and knowledge and experience lead to insight and wisdom. The life I touch, for ill or good, will touch another life, and that in turn another, until who knows where the trembling stops, and in what far place my touch will be felt, and in what far place my touch will be felt. Make your choices based on love, not fear. It is what Ken started with. It is what I would like to finish with. Tigetank, miha koto me mo te whakaronga noho ora maira. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. And go well, all of you, with your own healing and healing of the people you are with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liese. There are a few questions on the chat box, so maybe we have some time to address those.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have time.
Okay, maybe we can stop your share.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that. Just a moment.
Thank you. And so
There
if you
we go.
have, thank you. If you have any additional questions, you can please type them on the chat box so that we can address them now. And if you put question, it's easier for us to see where the questions are. So I'm going to see if I can find them. Here's, okay, just a moment. The first question is from Patricia. It was early on your presentation. She is asking about what you were describing with the 3 turns. And she wanted to, if you are able to explain what is the meaning of the 3 turns.
The 3 turns?
Yes, it was at the very beginning when you were discussing something with the different cultural traditions.
So around cultural understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, and with empathy and interpathy. Yeah, and is that what she was talking about? I think she was asking about. We have 3 ways, and it's not fixed in 3 ways, but it is about cultural understanding, and it's realizing too that there are some things that are very universal in our life, and that there is commonality in that, and that is where our empathy comes in, and that where we are all in this together. And then there is that aspect which is very much significant and very much unique to certain cultures. and that certain cultures, and whoever asked the question, it might be that in your culture, whether it is your culture of your people or your country or anything like that, or of your family, is a specific culture, and it only and it pertains to you. And then there is also the interpathy, is where those come together, where the universality and the specificness, if that's a word, come together, and we get the interpathy. And that is where, that is the space where we can do the work together and where healing happens together.
Thank you very much. Here is another question. This one is from Prana. He mentions culture prohibition on women who lost their husband, not on the widower. Do we disrespect the autonomy, how to cope with for well-being coming out of love and healing doesn't come? This I'm maybe we need some clarification, Liese.
From me?
No, from the person.
Yeah, I think so too, because I don't quite understand the question. So
so
if
Prana,
yeah,
you can type a clarification. In the meantime, we'll continue. Another question from Pranab is whether the person observes own death after dying, being in flotation observes the near and dear one's mourning, whether the eternal soul leaving the body stays nearby, and if it is how many days, and the loved one heals pain of the loved one's surviving.
well, I think that is where you, whoever wrote this, describe this in a way of believing, a way of experiencing it. And I don't think there is an absolute. If this is where in your culture, in your being, your beliefs are, then honor that and celebrate that and be with that. And that might be different from other cultures, from other groups of people. However, it is again about stay in your own integrity, in your own authenticity, within your own community, with that, and honoring your belief system. And the only thing I want to say, but that has my passion, and I think that is certainly something Elisabeth was fierce about too, is to not exclude. So not to create the in-groupers, that my way of believing is right and your way of believing is wrong, and you're the out-grouper. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just going down through here, so we'll catch up with whatever's at the bottom. A question from Corey Beth. What was the culture you referenced in the beginning when you shared the grieving mother and the grave?
Samoan, and that was in Samoa. And that is one, it's a Pacific island, beautiful Pacific island in the Pacific. Google it. Yeah.
There's a clarification about the 3 turns at your mother's funeral.
About a belief system. Well, that was to confuse the bad spirits. It is that was traditionally in our Frisian culture. If we walked around the graveyard with the coffin 3 times, the bad spirits, the bad energy would be completely confused and not know where to go. And so that meant that then whoever the person who was buried was free to move on to wherever they were going next in that other dimension.
Okay, great. So we got 2 for 1. That was excellent.
Okay.
So Kenneth asks the question, I am open and ask permission constantly. I work in a California state prison. I find conflict of capital punishment of prison and my sentiments of social justice for all. How do I find healing in this environment? I constantly ask for the support from God, and I also tell inmates and patients to forgive themselves.
Yeah, forgiveness would be a whole other topic. And I don't know whether all things are forgivable. However, certainly forgiving of oneself is very healing. My sense is you're working in an environment where there is a lot of conflict, a lot of dogma. And I also wonder, and that might be something for you to make sure you continue your own healing and really look after yourself, because here is, I want to introduce that concept of moral injury. And moral injury is when we get wounded in our heart and soul because we witness some behaviors that are so against our own ethics, our own values, or what we feel we are powerless to stop. So then it can easily feel like we're colluding with the structure, and certainly in the punitive system in the prisons. Um, that is where, an honor to you for working in the prison, that is where people really, you need to look after themselves, because that moral injury, and again, look it up. um, I can talk a lot about that, but we don't have the time. But that is around when your ethics and your values are so impacted, because in the work you do, they cannot, you cannot be completely congruent with that. Uh, and so the key is stay with your own authenticity, stay in your own truth, and heal that which you feel powerless about and can't change.
Thank you, Lise. We have technically 2 minutes left to our session. There's a clarification of the first question and a second question that I think we have time, but we may go over just a few minutes. Is that okay, Lise, for you?
I'm fine. It is what is the time at the moment? 5:30 in the morning. So I'm really surprised I'm in my body that early.
Okay, so I'm just going to take a quick pause to thank everyone for being here today. If you are able to stay with us for a few extra minutes, you are welcome to do so. If not, you can leave and you will have a link to this recording of this video with the language interpretation sometime in the next 48 hours. Okay, so please bear with us as we get all of it prepared and up on the YouTube, and then are able to send you the link. So you will be receiving a link with the recording. So if you need to leave now, thank you, and we will continue
Thank
with
you.
a few more questions. So
Thank you.
thank you. Pranab shares more clarity. So he's in India and he is telling us that in his culture, the imposition of certain restrictions, there is a restriction on how you live as a widow, not the widower. And so he is observing that there's an autonomy of the women that is being dishonored because it is creating and imposing a restriction on the grieving person. And so I guess he's inviting your comments on that.
Yeah, difference again. And I hear here difference of approach within the culture of where the expression, if I understand it right, of the widower is acknowledged in a different way from the expression of the widow. And I don't have much to comment on that. I think the that is how can we sit with that. If a widow would approach you, how could you still be with them? It is a similar thing in many cultures where the word death is not to be mentioned, where people are not to be told that they are dying, and that is very clear and strict in our culture. However, we can still be with them, and we can, without speaking out anything concrete, still make that connection. And ultimately it is about that. Ultimately it is about being totally in the now with the other. and being totally attuned to the other. And that's where the medicine can happen, even if there cannot be an outward expression, because that is what culture prescribes. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question from UMC in Milton, Massachusetts, I think. Do you share your beautiful words of wisdom with your grandchildren? And how do you recommend sharing the concepts with children?
Ah, how long is a piece of string? Yes, I mean, it is again, talking about being in your authenticity. And the wonderful thing about children is that they so are mostly connected with the essence and the truth of what life is about. Sometimes children are too wounded to be with that. However, for most children, and what we need to do is be honest with children and be really clear with children. And like Elisabeth always talks about, marinate them in love. And the key about that, it is two-way things. It's a two-way thing, because I get marinated by my grandchildren, and I think they are my biggest teachers right now too, because and listen to children, because the children have the simplicity of truth without the complete dogma, uh, unless they've been completely indoctrinated. However, if not, then the dogma has not settled in the psyche yet. And I think that's where we can learn from as adults, where we often hold on to so much of our dogma, of our belief system, and become rigid. And it's an opportunity to heal that with the space children have, and the wisdom children have, and the joy children have too.
Thank you. A question from Mausumi. Is it important to know our culture first to understand someone's culture, as you have explained the story of the graveyard?
Yeah, that is my sense, that what I need to be very aware of is what we need to be very aware of is what is my belief system, what is my expression, what is my way of being with bereavement, grief and loss and trauma, and how have I learned that from my culture. So that the more clear I am about that, the less I then, and the more aware I remain of that, the less I will intrude my belief system onto your culture, the less I will intrude that as a power over dynamic of my way of grieving, my way of mourning, my way of expressing is the right way, not yours. Mm.
Thank you. Lise, you tell us when you're ready to stop, but there's a few more questions. We go? Okay.
Well, it's all good. I'm not going back to bed. So, so whatever is helpful
Oh, thank you so
or
much.
whatever is okay.
That's so generous. So Isabel steps in and expands on the question that Prana excuse me. She says, the way I interpret your question is that you're asking about how do we respect cultural practices in mourning that are oppressive and patriarchal and unfair? And is that correct? And Prana agrees. So maybe we can speak a little more about that.
Yeah, sure. Because it does not mean that everything is okay. I mean, I think we are going back to the fundamental law is don't hurt yourself, don't hurt anybody else. And so there can be expressions in culture that are hurtful. In my culture, in your culture. Uh, I mean, that's I think something to be really aware of. That I need to take responsibility, for instance, for the hurtful things, and they are not okay, that are in my culture, that wound more than healing. And then our healing, and that is with every culture. So it's not about being colluding with everything. It's not about tolerating everything, because you see, although there is the structure of culture, underneath that is that whole universal law of humanity of don't hurt yourself and don't hurt anybody else. And you're the only one where you can also decide that this is okay and this is not okay. That is yeah, that is very important to stay with that, I think.
Thank you very much. So that is the end of our questions. I'd like to thank you again, and to thank everyone, and to thank Rodrigo, Ken, our interpreters, the entire tech team. And we very much are looking forward to continuing for the rest of the series. And
thank you so much for this, and thanks for all the work you do worldwide, everywhere. And again, I honor you all in that. Thank you for listening in. You're welcome to email me if you have any more questions, and I will email back, I promise. Might not be immediately, but I will absolutely email you back. And go well, all of you. Thank you.
thank you.